What's up, guys? I have a publicly available playlist on my channel called Background Music, which features all the background music that I feature in my videos. And I mention this not just for those unaware, so you know where to look if you hear something you like, but because I update this playlist regularly. And I recently added a whole bunch of stuff from this great channel, Superior Snivies. I wanted to give them a special mention because I really enjoyed what I've heard, and you are going to hear it as well in this video, and I really recommend checking them out. So, while I'm plugging stuff, then I may as well mention that liking and commenting the video helps the YouTube algorithm and helps make me a YouTube superstar, which I deserve to be, and subscribing and hitting the bell for all notifications makes you more readily available to perform those all-important functions. So, hop to it, and thank you in advance. So, let's get down to brass business. The topic of this video is a unique move, Substitute, and how it has performed in the first 5 generations, how exactly it's been utilized. So I am not going to be including replay demonstrations in this video because I'm already going to be thoroughly analyzing a lot of Substitute users, and the replay would just add, in my opinion, unnecessary length to an already lengthy video. I also am aware that a lot of my viewers treat these long videos as podcasts, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. So it was just more reason for me to not include a more engaging visual component. However, I realize that some people are going to want to see these Substitute users in action. So if you are interested in that, then I'm going to redirect you, or direct you after you watch this video, to the Smogon forums, smogon.com/forums. I realize a lot of my viewers don't use them, but if you want to see all those high-level tournament games I'm constantly talking about in my videos, then this is where they are. Go to the homepage, smogon.com/forums, Control F tournaments, or just scroll down. Start with the Smogon Premier League. It has everything, all the old generations. So we're talking about Gens 1 through 5 in this video. So you go to SPL, the most recent one, 11. I know my Roman numerals, I swear. And you go down black and white through RBY, and you just peruse the games to your heart's desire, and you will find Substitute users, because Substitute is a highly useful competitive move. So you can go through the entire tournament, and then you can go through past iterations of SPL. Like, there are 3 replay threads from the last 3 years on the first page, and then you can keep going. Then you can go through other tournaments, but it's I just gave you a good starting point. And if you want to see other top players discuss the metagames that Substitute is used in, and the Substitute users and why they're good, and just generally have more resources to learn about the old generations, then I'm going to redirect you to, or direct you after this video, of course, to Ruins of Alph. I mention the resources found in this subforum all the time in my videos, and on Discord especially. So if you go here and do some browsing, you will find a lot to enjoy and learn from. So let's get into the meat of the video. Substitute. So we're starting with RBY. We know that the first generation has a lot of wacky mechanics. I like them. A lot of people think they're weird. That's not important right now. So the first thing to remember is that Substitute is very much not exempt from RBY's weirdness, or uniqueness, let's say. And it crucially does not block status. That is a defining feature of Substitute in other generations, but not in RBY. So Rhydon is the only Substitute user you're going to see in high-level RBY play. You're not going to be seeing Substitute Tauros or anything like that. So you don't have to worry about it getting Thunder Wave throughout a sub, because it's immune. Matter of fact, that's one of the reasons you don't see Substitute Tauros, because it does not protect it from Thunder Wave Starmie or Alakazam or Chansey, or Exeggutor Sleep Powder. And Exeggutor Sleep Powder is the main one Rhydon has to worry about, because Exeggutor is one of Rhydon's most common switch-ins, and Substitute does nothing to protect it from Sleep Powder or Stun Spore. So that is a crucial one to keep in mind. So another crucial mechanic, this one you don't see as often, but it's that Explosion or Self-Destruct do not KO their user when they're used against a sub. So if your Snorlax is spamming Self-Destruct against a Rhydon, then it is not going to faint if Rhydon uses sub. It will not faint until the Self-Destruct hits an actual Pokemon, not the sub. This is another reason why you don't see a substitute Tauros. It does not protect it from Golem or Exeggutor or mainly Snorlax booms. So that is something you'll see with Rhydon once in a while against certain Snorlax sets. The last one is something you're rarely going to see because you're never going to see anyone Hyper Beam a Rhydon with a substitute up, but it is worth knowing that Hyper Beam does not recharge when used against a substitute. So those are the RBY specific sub mechanics. So let's get into what substitute does. So you're thinking, well, I've played in game and I don't really see what sub does, because you just lose 25% of your health and then they hit you with something and then you lose the sub. Yeah, in game I also thought substitute was not very good, but in the competitive scene, then, just like Stealth Rock isn't very good in game, then Substitute is a whole different beast. So the main thing that makes Substitute good is that, first of all, you can feasibly create a lot of scenarios where you are up against a Pokemon that cannot break your Substitute. So the easiest example is when you have a Pokemon with 404 HP or more, and you are up against a Pokemon whose best attack against it is Seismic Toss. So we know Seismic Toss does 100 damage, because it's coming from a level 100 Pokemon, and we know that Substitute takes 25% of your HP. So if you have 404 HP or more, then you are creating a Substitute which has 101 HP, and thus will always survive the Seismic Toss. So, and there are other scenarios, like when they're just Pokemon who rely on status, not in RBY, but later generations, where you can get situations where they cannot break your sub. Like a water type with Surf and Toxic is not going to break the substitute of an opposing water type, for example. So, yeah, there's that. And the second reason, well, you're probably thinking right now, well, why wouldn't you just hit something on the switch? Because whatever they switch into is going to break your sub. And from there, it's like you just lost 25% of your health for no reason. Why couldn't you have just attacked? Here's the big one. A lot of what competitive Pokemon is about is switching and predicting switching. Substitute removes the prediction factor because you see what they are going to switch to, and that is crucial. That way you are, and it's very, very difficult to play around a Pokemon with sub because it gives it a degree of safety in dishing out its attacks. So, like we're going to see with Black and White Mamoswine earlier, then a lot of its switch-ins are Pokemon that die to one of its stab moves, but can switch into the other stab move no problem, like Lando on Earthquake or Keldeo on Ice Crash. So you have that, and by using sub, then you remove that. You remove the prediction factor, and that's really, really crucial because Pokemon is not about being the best at predicting, because that will never be consistent. It's about forcing scenarios where you are able to unleash your best moves with as little risk as possible, and Substitute facilitates that. So finally, it is a great weapon alongside Paralysis, as we'll see, not just because you can sub repeatedly until your opponent gets fully parried, and then you outspeed and KO them and still have a sub up for the next Pokemon. That's the best scenario. But also because when you have a sub up against a paralyzed Pokemon switching in, then suddenly they are really hard-pressed to take you on, as we're going to see with Rhydon examples. And finally, Substitute punishes trainers who are trying to sacrifice something to get a free switch. Like if let's take Rhydon, right? And let's say you're going to sacrifice your 2% paralyzed Gengar on Rhydon, or against Rhydon, so you get a free switch into your Tauros. However, Rhydon substitutes as you try to sack that Gengar, and suddenly it has a sub up for your Tauros, so it is able to hit it safely. So that's those are the benefits of substitute. So how does Rhydon use it in particular? Well, you don't spam it early game because you want to be as healthy as possible so you can take a Tauros Blizzard later in the game if necessary. and Substitute does not get you anywhere against Exeggutor. Early game, Rhydon is going to come in against things like Paralyze, Alakazam, and certain Chansey variants, and it is going to spam Rock Slide or Body Slam most of the time. Body Slam creates its own paralysis. It really threatens Starmie, and of course it is good against Exeggutor. Rock Slide really hurts Exeggutor, but Body Slam covers both Egg and Starmie. And once those Pokemon are paralyzed, then Sub Rhydon really goes to town, because then you have that exact scenario. You sub on a Chansey that runs away because your Earthquake pounds it, and then they switch to a paralyzed Starmie, and you have an Earthquake that threatens to 2 a KO, and you are behind a sub, and they're paralyzed, so this can really spiral. Substitute offers a layer of protection that makes Rhydon even more difficult to deal with. Again, you don't spam it at will because RBY doesn't have leftovers, so you can't just heal it off, but you are going to you are going to get a lot of opportunities that you otherwise would not get. Like specifically the being able to beat Starmie and still have a sub up for Tauros late in the game. That is a huge one. So when paralyzed teams are forced to take an extra attack from Rhydon, then it's really dangerous. So that is Rhydon in a nutshell. It's pretty simple. Again, you don't spam it, because if you spam sub with Rhydon before you know their entire team, and then they whip out a Zapdos, i.e. the Pokemon Rhydon exists to counter, then that's a waste. But later in the game, when you have a clear shot at taking out 1 or 2 Pokemon, then absolutely. Early in the game, you create your paralysis with both Rhydon and its teammates, and then later in the game, you are going to be able to get a sub up against Chansey, against a sleeping Pokemon too. And when their Starmie, Zam, Egg are paralyzed and weakened, then you can sub up and you can blow by them, and then you can force Tauros or Snorlax to eat Earthquakes they really don't want to be eating, and that will give you an edge with your own Tauros, especially. So Rhydon is a fearsome physical sweeper. I mean, even without sub, it is dangerous. And there are a lot of players who like sets with stuff like Leer and Hyper Beam for Paralyzed Egg and even Rest. But this is the bread and butter Rhydon set because it creates its own para and then abuses that para with sub. So paralysis and sub tend to go hand in hand. And Rhydon was the first real abuser of that. So the fact it can really, it not just hurt Chansey, but really turn it into an opportunity to wreck the opposing team is part of what makes Rhydon so good, and especially with sub, because again, Starmie comes in and it gets sacked, but Starmie comes in and gets sacked, and the Rhydon has a sub up. That's really not fun. So that's been Rhydon. So let's move on to Gen 2. Rhydon does not use sub anymore. But first, before we go on to Gen 2 sub-Pokemon, then we have to mention the mechanical differences. So in GSC, sub now blocks status moves, and other things like Leech Seed, which was not used in RBY, but still, because it was bad. But it's still not very common in GSC, but it's used occasionally. But sub now blocks it. It also blocks Pain Split and Ghost Curse. Those are on the rare side, especially Ghost Curse, but it's worth knowing. Explosion and Self-Destruct now KO their user against a sub. So let's say you sub with Tentacruel, which is going to be our first example, and the opposing Cloyster explodes, common scenario, then Cloyster goes down. So there's that. Let me just plug in this tried and true Tentacruel set, which is our go-to example. It blocks stat-lowering moves like Growl and Charm, which were not used in RBY, but now they are actually pretty good in GSC for stopping stuff like Curselax. It blocks Giga Drain, always. Now, this is a fairly obscure mechanic that I see a lot of people not know, so I don't mean that Giga Drain is not very good against sub or something. I mean that it fails 100% of the time. It will just not work. Like, Tentacruel uses a sub, Exeggutor uses Giga Drain for some reason, then it will just fail. It will miss every single time. So that's very important to know. Substitute can also be baton passed, so let's say Espeon subs up and then baton passes to Snorlax. Snorlax will have the sub. However, Snorlax is going to have Espeon sub, so it's not passing huge substitutes, because Espeon, whatever 25% of Espeon's max HP is, then that is the substitute that's being passed to Snorlax. You're not suddenly getting a huge HP sub just because you pass the sub to a Pokemon with huge HP. Finally, this one is very obscure, and in fact, I didn't even know it until I did some research for this video, and I've been playing GSC for years, but Protect fails behind a sub. And the reason I didn't know it, and I'm pretty sure few other people do as well, is because nothing really uses Protect and sub on the same set in GSC. There's not enough to really abuse it with, so... but, you know, now you know, so don't get any sub-protect ideas to stall out Thunders or something. So, there is that. Oh, and Leftovers now exists, meaning that even if you use sub, you are not guaranteed to... then you still get health back, making it easier to use sub, which is especially important because there's spikes now. So imagine, you know, subbing with spikes down and... you don't have leftovers? Yeah, I don't like that. So, why do we use substitute in GSC? So, keep in mind the legendary electric, Zapdos and Raikou. They need to hit Snorlax as hard as possible, and thus they use Thunder over Thunderbolt. And this, for a couple hits, it's fine, but when you need to chain Thunder hits together, it gets really, really ugly. So, and Substitute preys on this. So our go-to substitute Pokemon is Tentacruel. It is not the most common substitute Pokemon in GSC, but historically it has been the most famous up until a couple of years ago. So that's why I'm choosing to lead with it. So, Tentacruel, you know, you would think, oh, this thing gets destroyed by the electrics, but then you sub up, and you have Swords Dance and Sludge Bomb, and once again, with Paralysis, then this absolutely destroys the electrics. I mean, hitting Thunder through Paralysis against a Pokemon spamming Sub and Swords Dance is really, really dicey. You paralyze Zapdos and don't let it rest it off, or I mean, even arrested Zapdos trying to sleep talk Thunders against a subbing Pokemon, a Pokemon it speed ties with, that gets very ugly very fast, and that is the strength of Tentacruel. In a metagame with Thunder spam, it actually turns it to its advantage, despite being Thunder weak. Sometimes I love Pokemon's intricacies. So, that is the idea of Tentacruel. It also completely dominates Cloyster. Even if Cloyster runs HP Electric, then it is not close to guaranteed to break the sub. So, Tentacruel is also very fast by GSC standards. It outspeeds a ton of common offensive Pokemon like Jinx and Nidoking. Has some good resistances like Resist Machamp's Cross Chop. So, yeah, it's a very dangerous offensive Pokemon. Doesn't offer much in the way of defensive utility because it doesn't switch in that easily. But in its good matchups, it is devastating. Oh, and it's one of the best answers to Vaporeon, who is really terrifying. So, turning Vaporeon into setup fodder is pretty amazing. And you have to be careful around Raikou because it's faster and sometimes runs Roar. But if you force Raikou to rest or get Para on it, neither of which are very difficult, then Tentacruel goes to town. I mean, it's not unlikely for a double electric team to struggle with Tentacruel just because of how easy it is to inflict Zapdos or Raikou with paralysis or sleep with some support from Exeggutor. So, Sub-Tenta is an absolute menace, and I think it's very underrated in the current metagame. So, there are some other great Pokemon in GSC that use Sub, the most famous of which is Jinx. So, Tentacruel's Sub is more of the paralysis-abusing variety, whereas Jinx's Sub is more of the switch-abusing variety. And this is especially nasty coupled with a sleep move, because a lot of what absorbing sleep is prediction reliant, and the most common sleep talker in GSC is Zapdos, who does not want to eat its mighty stab Ice Beam, but sometimes you are forced to try and make that risky switch to Zapdos to absorb Lovely Kiss, because otherwise you are just going to have a Pokemon shut down for an indeterminate amount of time. So when you lead off with Substitute with Jinx, then you make it a lot harder for them to pull that prediction off, because you could feasibly Ice Beam before sleeping because you are protected by the sub. So you have a whole host of options at your disposal when you use Jinx already. I mean, you don't need sub, whereas I would say Tentacruel does need it, but sub is a lot of what makes Jinx difficult to play around. For example, it threatens Exeggutor, but it doesn't OHKO it from absolute max HP. However, if you have a sub up, then you block Sleep Powder, you block Psychic, you block Giga Drain, or you don't block Psychic, but you don't have the sub broken by Psychic, you block Giga Drain completely, block Stun Spore, and if it explodes, then you just lost 19% of your HP because of Leftovers Recovery, and you got rid of an Exeggutor, so that's a great trade. So, and if they have HP Fire, then they have significantly lowered bulk, because HP Fire cuts into your IVs, or DVs as they're known in GSC. So, yeah, sub Jinx is really, really nasty. So that situation against Exeggutor, they don't want to keep their egg in, they don't want to get their Snorlax slept, but they don't want their Zapdos to get Ice Beamed, so you sub up, and you see what their answer is. And if they go to Zapdos right away, then you can threaten with Ice Beam. If they go to Snorlax, you can Ice Beam, because you can just follow it up with Lovely Kiss. You can sub fairly safely if you think they're going to pivot out to Zapdos and then start the cycle over again. So Jinx sub on Snorlax switch, Ice Beam as Snorlax breaks sub again as you think they're going to try and absorb it with Zapdos. They go to Zapdos, you can Ice Beam. If they stay in, you can just threaten Lovely Kiss afterwards. I mean, there's always an element of risk to Jinx because of its frailty and Lovely Kiss's accuracy, but sub helps give you the flexibility to play around it if you so choose. And if your predictions are solid, then you can potentially really ruin the opponent trying to play around it. But it's not just prediction, just like risking your important Pokemon because you think your opponent's going to do something. It's a prediction that you can afford to go for. It's a prediction with high upside that you can afford because of the safety afforded by Substitute. So Jinx is a really, really dangerous Pokemon. It has shaped GSC over the last couple of years. Really ruins traditional offense stuff. So sub doesn't do anything to really help it get past its defensive counters, like Snorlax and Suicune and Vaporeon, but with good play, a lot of people like hiding behind subs and fishing for its 10% with Ice Beam freezes and sub Spud F drops, so you can take that route, or you can just attack and weaken the opposing team and then spring sub on them late in the game. The Jinx also makes use of Substitute great, not just because it eases prediction, but in the event that you have to sacrifice something before trying to revenge kill Jinx, which happens a lot, then Substitute preys on that fantastically. Because let's say you're gonna sack your Machamp before trying to finish it off with Gengar or Zapdos, and you sub on that Machamp switch, and then you Psychic it to death, and they're very much in between a rock and a hard place. So that is the kind of substitute abuse Jinx provides. So there are a couple more sub users in GSC. Hiding behind subs against Thundering Zapdos is also a very good feeling, because it can potentially go very badly for them even if they Thunder on Lovely Kiss, let's say. So because they're not even breaking your sub and then you still have it. So a couple other underrated sub users. This Exeggutor set is really nice because you hide behind sub, you Leech Seed. The Sub Seed combination is a classic because you drain the opponent while healing yourself, and healing yourself allows you to make more substitutes and keep going, of course. And this set hides behind subs and dishes out para against Pokemon like Zapdos and Skarmory, which makes it tougher to deal with Pokemon like Marowak, Machamp, or Tentacruel. And, of course, Psychic is Psychic. Not having Explosion can be unfortunate sometimes, but this set is a monster of support and is a lot more capable of dealing damage than you would think at first. Like, suddenly, even something like Snorlax really struggles to deal with this one-on-one. And Zapdos and Skarmory, Leech Seed makes Exeggutor a real terror. Forces a lot of really uncomfortable matchups, spreads a lot of real irritating damage. And again, it's because of the cover afforded by Substitute. So another one is Espeon, which is kind of like a faster special version of Tentacruel. So the last move on sub Espeon can be anything. It can be HP Water, it can be Morning Sun, it can be Baton Pass. But the basic idea is that you sub and you against paralyzed electrics especially, but the sub Morning Sun combination, thanks to Espeon's great speed, means that you dance around Zapdos pretty nicely, even if it's not paralyzed. And if it is paralyzed, then, God help them. But it's basically the same idea. It's like a combination of Tentacruel and Jinx. It really abuses paralyzed or sleeping Pokemon, and it's of course it can Baton Pass the substitute if it so chooses as well, which is another element of what makes Espeon such a dangerously versatile Pokemon. But it's mostly a combination of preying on paralyzed or sleeping Pokemon a la Tentacruel and taking advantage of slower sacrifices a la Jinx, and easing prediction in the same vein, because of what that fast, strong Psychic Stab does. So, against offensive teams, it's similarly terrifying. Now, with these offensive sub-Pokemon, the Tentacruels, Jinxes, and Espeons, then you got to be careful about switching them in. Espeon, less so if you have Morning Sun. In that case, you can switch it into Gengar and Machamp very nicely and just heal off their damage. But if you don't have Morning Sun, and with the others, then you can't be throwing them into attacks, which means that you got to be careful both in team building and in using them if you want to get the most out of them. But it's a price worth paying because of how threatening they are with sub. Again, Jinx and Espeon don't really need sub. There's some flexibility to them, but sub is a lot of what makes them so difficult to deal with standard GSC staples like the Electrics using Thunder, or even Snorlax. Like if you get a growth and a sub with Espeon, then Snorlax is suddenly really, really struggling. And yeah, you could say you could just growth again, but the sub affords you a lot of protection, means it can't blow up on you, means it can't lovely kiss you, means its body slam won't paralyze you, stuff like that. So, and finally I want to mention Vaporeon, who is also underutilized with the subset, but it's very good. You can sub growth a la Espeon. It has 101 HP subs, which is not really relevant in GSC because nothing uses Seismic Toss, but yeah. And you can either go for the sweep with Ice Beam and really paralyze Zapdos, or you can BP. You can BP a sub, you can BP a growth, you can BP both against paralyzed sleeping Pokemon. So yeah, sub in GSC is a major abuser of the status that the generation is known for spreading: paralysis and sleep. And of course, if you get a freeze somewhere, then there's little better to abuse that than a substitute as well. So those are our GSC sub users, and I'm going to take a quick bathroom break, and then I will be right back, and we will delve into advance. Alright, isn't this music fantastic? Again, check out Superior Snivies. Alright, so we're moving on to Gen 3. So, a lot changed in this generation, and that goes for the usage of Substitute as well. So, let's change our team to Gen 3. So, a lot of sub-uses in this generation. So, here are the mechanical changes, or the relevant mechanical things to be aware of. First of all, it no longer blocks Giga Drain, so, I mean, that would be crazy if T-Tar could set up a sub and, you know, just have Giga Drain fail against it, but that is no longer a thing. Giga Drain hits substitutes now. This is the generation where Substitute starts to most resemble its applications in the modern metagames. I can't really think of many differences regarding Substitute in particular. There is one, but we'll get to that. But besides this, then this is going to be the Substitute you are likely familiar with in the newer metas. So no longer blocks Giga Drain. Protect can now be used behind a sub. It blocks item stealing stuff like Trick and Knockoff. Not that you see a ton of those in advance, especially Trick, but you know, it's important to mention. It blocks Intimidate, so stat lowering stuff. Yeah, if you have a sub up when the Intimidate Pokemon comes in, then you will block it. I mean, if Salamence switches in on the turn, Tyranitar uses Substitute, Tyranitar will obviously still get Intimidated, but if T-Tar already has a sub up by the time Mence comes in, that Intimidate will not go through. Sub is, of course, significantly affected by the permanent Sandstorm flying around, both in terms of sand-affected Pokemon not being able to heal in sand. So something like a Sub Charizard with lefties will lose 25% of its HP and not heal in sand, where something like a Sub T-Tar will heal, or Sub Jirachi. And some Pokemon don't use Sub and lefties, meaning they lose health in sand, and that's something crucial to consider. But it's also sometimes used in their favor. For example, with Pinch Berries, that's a big one, because Substitute and Pinch Berries synergize very, very well together. Because you can sub down to 25%, remember to use an HP number divisible by 4, so you can activate the Pinch Berry after 3 substitutes, and then you can get your Lychee Berry for an attack boost, Pitaya for special attacks, Salic for speed, and we'll be going over some of those right now, actually. So our first substitute user is the poster child, or the poster Pokemon for such a strategy. And of course, there are not just pinch berries, but pinch abilities. So substitute gets you down to both of those. So this is the classic Sub-SD Heracross, Sub-Salic SD Heracross set. In the modern metagame, it runs Focus Punch thanks to Ostomatidos. In the past, it ran Rock Slide, but Focus Punch means it does not rely on Magneton to destroy Skarmory, and its sheer strength means it muscles through pretty much everything else. So, anyway, I mentioned the divisible by 4 HP stat, so the easiest way to do it is to just use 30 HP IVs. This means if Heracross comes in at 100%, even without Sandstorm, then you substitute 3 times and you get your Salic Berry. So that Salic Berry activates at 25%, Swarm at 33, so a fully set up Heracross, facilitated by the use of Substitute, will have a speed boost, allowing it to outspeed everything in OU, and a boost to its Mega Horn. And if it manages to grab a Swords Dance along the way, then it's just gravy. Now, Endure does not work similarly because Endure does not do anything against things like Status and Leech Seed, and you don't want to be enduring to 1 HP with a Pokemon like Heracross because of the presence of Sand, or you would just die if you lived Salamence HP flying at 1 hit. But with Sub, then yeah, you are going to have a limited window of destruction, but you are still going to be able to destroy a lot of things. So yeah, so here's where Substitute comes in. You guard yourself from things like Blissey, T-Wave, and Toxic, and Gengar, Will-O-Wisp, and you sub down to Salic, and you have your superpowered Mega Horn. And a lot of the time, what you're going to be able to do, if you're subbing down against a faster Pokemon, you will also be able to get the Swords Dance. So here's the scenario. You sub as, let's say, Salamence with Choice Band comes in, and you keep spamming sub as it HP flyings you down to the Salic Berry, and you now have your Salic, you have your Swarm, and since you have the sub up, and you are now faster, then you can freely Swords Dance, and then unleash your boosted Swarm Swords Dance Mega Horn upon the opponent. So sub in conjunction with Salic Berry allows you to get Swords Dance. And if you are facing a slower Pokemon, then that if a slower Pokemon switches into you, this is applicable to Pokemon that switch in, not a one-on-one scenario. So let's say you don't have a Salamence switching into you. You have a Suicune, a bold Suicune switching into you. And, let's just pretend it doesn't have Roar or something. It's Sleep Talk. So you can sub as the Suicune switches in. It's not a good Heracross switch in, but for the sake of example, let's say Metagross. That's a more feasible switch in. And I'm just going to pretend like it doesn't want to be exploding because that's... I'm going to drive myself crazy using all these theoretical examples that can be nitpicked. So I am going to just say slower Pokemon. It switches in as you sub, then you Swords Dance up, and then you can keep subbing because you are faster. Whereas if a faster Pokemon comes in, you just sub down to the Salic, then you're faster, then you Swords Dance. But either way, you are able to, with the combination of Sub and Salicberry, you are able to get fast and get strong with fairly little effort. This is not a very complicated set. Other than don't switch it into attack so you get a good setup. But that's fairly simple. Yeah, so this is the poster child for subbing down to Salic, subbing down to a Pinchberry and a Pinch ability. It's one of the most dangerous endgame sweepers in Advance. So another prime substitute user is Suicune. And this generation is where the 101 HP substitute becomes a household Pokemon term because Blissey uses Seismic Toss a lot. So this is the standard sub Suicune, and you have the 101 HP substitute, so you survive a Blissey Seismic Toss, and then you keep subbing up, and eventually you'll be able to overwhelm it, and more importantly, you will not be getting annoyed by its Toxic or Thunder Wave. So EVs can vary. I think something like this is generally the safest option. Suicune has a lot of versatility. Hydro Pump can be Surf. Ice Beam can be Rain Dance. That's a popular set nowadays, and I would use Surf if you're going to do that. And it can be Rest as well. It can be Roar. It can be Toxic. So Sub Suicune as a whole is a massive, massive threat. That could have its own video, so we're going to try to keep it to a reasonable length here. But yeah, so I wanted to emphasize the idea of the UD Suicune, which is the Surf Rain Dance set in particular. So the idea is that we know that sand can be a hindrance to non-sand immune substitute Pokemon. Heracross sometimes turns it to its advantage, but also it can be kind of a hindrance. And with Suicune, which wants to be creating lots and lots of substitutes to stall out things like Blissey, and even stuff like Celebi and Milotic, then subbing down, it can only substitute a couple times in sand. So by using Rain Dance, then you remove the pressure of sand, and that's why this set is so effective, because a lot of times Blissey will often take Suicune with it in sand, but with Rain Dance, then Suicune ends up dominating Blissey. I mean, as long as you don't switch into it, as long as Blissey switches into you and you're at high health, then yeah, you'll be great. So this also helps when you're dealing with stuff like Milotic, and it makes it hard to PP stall Surf because in addition to your Calm Mind boost, you're giving it a Rain boost as well. But it's mostly the ability to bypass the chokehold effect of sand and continue to be able to create substitutes. And Suicune with a sub up outside of sand is terrifying. So yeah, I was DC'd for some unknown reason, but that's not important. So yeah, that's the main one. And then you can do other stuff, like you can do Toxic to wear down Blissey while you sub up and make it harder to deal with. And Ice Beam, of course, is great coverage. And you can Roar to win Calm Mind Wars against other Suicune. That's actually a very dangerous set. But it requires more dancing around the sand problem, whereas this directly is an answer to the sand problem. So that's why I think this is the most popular variant of substitute Suicune at the time of this video. So who knows how it'll look in the future, but I'm fairly confident about that now. So the substitute Calm Mind phenomenon is not exclusive to Jirachi, because being able to hide behind subs while you boost up is obviously a good idea, as we know with Tentacruel and Espeon from GSC. and even Vaporeon. But here it's even more dangerous because Calm Mind is also a defensive boost as well as an offensive one. So you could create scenarios where suddenly your opponent's special attack is not breaking your sub anymore. Like, for example, against an unboosted Jirachi, a Milotic substitute will break the sub. But after a Calm Mind, suddenly you have that situation that you strive for with a substitute, having that matchup where the opponent cannot break your sub. Because, you know, if you can have a sub up, then you prefer to have one because it guards you from so much. So Jirachi is a great sub Calm Minder because it has the 101 HP subs for Blissey. It's also very fast. 100 base speed is really good in advance. And it also has Steel typing, meaning it can substitute freely in Sandstorm. It will heal regardless with leftovers, and that is a big part of what makes it so good. It also has a devil of a move pool, so it can. The standard, I think it's Psychic Fire Punch traditionally, because stab is good, and you can go fast, or you can mix up the EVs any which way. You can make it bulky, you can make it strong, you can make it fast. We'll just keep it simple with speed because that's a major part of what makes Jirachi good. But Psychic Fire Punch is good, and then you can also go Psychic Thunderbolt. You can go Ice Punch Thunderbolt. You can even throw in Thunder if you like. That is generally what it chooses between. So yeah, there are other good sub Calm Minders. Like, I recently did a video about Raikou, which has its struggles. It does not have 101 HP subs, but it is traditionally a sub Calm Minder in advance, and it can be very dangerous because Suicune against defensive teams uses Substitute to set up against walls, and against offensive teams it prefers being able to hit from behind a sub against revenge killers like Zapdos, Arrow, Dugtrio. And Jirachi in particular loves hiding behind subs because it can hurt a lot of Earthquake users, Earthquake being one of the few ways to really hurt Jirachi, and Earthquake users are very often not super safe against Jirachi, so by hiding behind a sub, you guarantee that you hit those Earthquake users while hitting you. So another example of the excellence of Substitute, in addition to the whole T-Wave blocking thing. Jirachi being Toxic Immune is great, but you don't like getting T-Waved or Body Slammed by defensive Jirachi, T-Waved by Porygon 2, Blissey, Regice, so, or even like a Magneton. So subs paralysis blocking is huge for Jirachi. The revenge killing blocking is huge, and it's just a great set. So Jirachi has a lot of versatility. Then there's Raikou, of course, who makes fully... Raiku's sub is less of a you can't break my sub anymore kind of sub, and it's more of a guarding against revenge killing kind of sub. So, I mean, again, if you have like a Calm Mind up, then something like a Gengar or a Zapdos is not going to break your sub, and that's great, but it's more guarding itself against something like a Raikou or a Dugtrio revenge kill, and against offensive teams where they're going to want to sack like a low HP T-Tar or Metagross to it, and you sub as they try to sack it, then in that case, then Raikou is very scary. So let's go to a different kind of sub user, not a sub setup type, but a sub endeavor type. So here we have Swampert, who uses who is sand immune, first of all, so it can sub down to 1 HP safely, and once you are at 1 HP, thanks to Substitute, then you make use of that by endeavoring your target down to 1 HP. Ideally, they die to sand, so you get another shot at another Pokemon cleanly, but potentially behind a sub. But in any case, you're going to be able to finish them off with Surf or Hydro. Hydro's damage, even with Torrent. Oh, it's another thing it does. Pinch Berry and Pinch Ability, a la Heracross. So you're going to want Hydro's power. Surf is really pathetically weak against so many T-Tar variants. It's depressing. I mean, the accuracy is also depressing, but still. And then the last move, traditionally, Ice Beam for coverage. However, the problem with Sub Endeavor Swampert is that Pokemon with recovery moves, so Blissey, Celebi, Starmie, Milotic, they will outstall it. Because Endeavor only has 8 PP, Hydro Pump doesn't have a lot, and you get into a prediction game, even if you have Surf and Ice Beam, you can start attacking them, but then you risk not doing anything to them at all. So instead of Ice Beam, a lot of players, Asta came up with Roar, which is great because you force them to switch to something else that does not want to take on Swampert. So let's say you roar in a Tyranitar, and they have a choice between dying to a Torrent Hydro Pump against a Swampert behind sub, or switching in that Milotic that walls them. But if you Endeavor the Milotic on the switch, then it cannot recover it off. It's going to die to sand. So by forcing another Pokemon, it's a prediction battle, but it's better than just getting completely blanked by Milotic. Because Milotic, you have to really hope. You only have 8 Endeavors to work with, meaning it's really, really hard to force and Milotic has 32 recovers, just like Celebi and Starmie. So it's really hard to force them into a position where they're going to try to attack you and then Endeavor and you can beat them. But with Roar, then you force them into another Pokemon that doesn't want to stay in for fear of giving Swampert just a free KO. But if they switch back to their counter, then they are in danger of having that counter just destroyed, and from there it can snowball really, really nastily. And of course, Roar is very good with spikes always, and like safety against something like a Curse-Lax. This is a great safety net against Curse-Lax, actually. One of my favorite things to use about it when I first started using it like 6.5 years ago. But yeah, that is Sub-Endeavor Swampert for you. It is a monster of a Pokemon if used correctly. And the other move besides Roar is Swagger. Now, this one is just kind of dumb, but it's basically going, okay, well, I'm just going to confuse you and you won't be able to use your recovery move, and that makes Endeavor a lot easier to spam. So, that's the basic strategy behind Endeavor Swampert. It's a fundamentally sound Pokemon, requires awareness of its flaws, because they can be debilitating, but if used correctly, it is an absolute monster. I mean, it's also important to remember that, unlike Heracross, which outspeeds everything in OU after a Salic boost, Swampert does not. It doesn't even outspeed Starmie, let alone Dugtrio and Arrow. But, oh yeah, and when you were using such a Swampert set, then, excuse me. Now, this Swampert is different from the other sub-users in that you don't mind it taking a hit. In fact, you actually kind of enjoy it because it makes it easier to get down to Salic and Torrent. So you can turn eating a Metagross Meteor Mash into a positive. So here's another YouTube music ad. Okay. So you can do that, but you can't rely on the Swampert defensively. Like, this cannot be your Tyranitar counter. You're going to have to give it some backup. Can't be your only Tyranitar counter, let's say. So that's something important to keep in mind. But yeah, Swampert is a lot of fun. So another of the... Now we're going to go to Charizard, because it also uses a pinch ability, and it has the opportunity to run a, what's it called? A pinch berry set as well, and even better, it does not mind sand because it can remove it for itself with Sunny Day, thus making its fire moves even stronger. And I've raved about the fun factor of this set in the past, and the fact it's just so strong. But yeah, if you will sub down, remember to use a 30 special. You don't want to do that with Swampert because you want to be able to sub down to. You want the Salic at 1 HP. That to get the optimal use of Endeavor. But with Charizard, when you're subbing down to the Pinch Berry, then you want it after 3 subs, giving you some flexibility with Sandstorm. So whereas Swampert doesn't have that problem. So yeah, you want that a la Heracross, and then you just use whatever last 4 in defense for Metagross Meteor Mash or something. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Actually, 4 special defense is probably better for security against Gengar Thunderbolt, so do that. Anyway, point being, you sub down to Blaze range, and then you're really strong, especially with Pataya and Sun, and you just throw out nuclear attacks. Now, this is the Pinch Blaze variant of Charizard. The Pinch variant of Charizard is more just a wall breaker in terms of removing a specific Pokemon, like Blissey or Milotic. However, the more traditional sub-Charizard variant is one of the few Pokemon that does not mind subbing with... lefties sub, but doesn't mind it, even though it's affected by sand, because it gets it closer down to Blaze. Just like same with Swampert, it doesn't mind switching into like a Metagross Mash, once, because it gets it closer to Blaze. But the reasons Charizard would like to sub is, also it should be a mild nature, is because this is the prediction variant of Charizard, where a lot of Pokemon that can switch into it are afraid of one move, but can switch in easily on another move. Easiest example, T-Tar is a great answer to most stuff this Charizard is going to do, except for Focus Punch. But Focus Punch is a very risky move, and this actually shows off another advanced strategy, the Sub Punch combination, where Focus Punch is a really strong move, but you can't use it because of the whole, if you get hit, then you don't make a work factor. So, and using it on the Switch is also fairly risky, and Substitute eliminates that risk. So, Sub makes sure that you can HP Grass Swampert safely, that you can Fire Blast Salamence for as much damage as you can safely, and without, Focus Punching either of them and feeling dumb. You Fire Blast Zapdos rather than Focus Punching your HP Grass into it. This is an example of Sub making it harder to switch around a Pokemon, and make sure you have your IVs set correctly, because Showdown screws with them a lot. But yeah, so this is Substitute making it harder to switch around a Pokemon already hard to switch into. Now, nowadays you're going to be seeing a lot of Dragon Claw over Sub because of the increased coverage, but Sub means that Charizard really locks into its good matchups, because it takes away the prediction factor of trying to figure out which Pokemon is going to switch in, because it doesn't always have the raw power to just 2-hit KO everything with one move. So it's going to have to be more precise, and Substitute allows it to be as precise as possible. I mean, even a naive Mence, or like a Mixed Mence, minus special defense, or a Choice Band Mence, which loses HP in Sand, is still not going to enjoy a Fire Blast. So this set is still very, very good, and really it punishes Protect. That's another use of Sub that I haven't mentioned until now. Protect is not very common in GSC, it doesn't exist in RBY, but in Advance it's very common, and if your Skarmory or your Swampert is protecting and they use that turn to get up a Sub, yikes, you do not want that. So, that is the main purpose of this Charizard, to ease prediction, abuse Protect spam, and make sure your make sure your attacks hit their targets, so you are dishing out as much damage as possible. Making sure you Focus Punch that Blissey or that Tyranitar. Now there are some variants to this set. You can run like Pitaya over lefties, so that if Blissey spams Seismic Toss on you, after you hit it with the first Focus Punch, then you can still eliminate it with a Blaze, Pitaya, Fire move. So you remove some prediction factor, but this Charizard is still an absolute devil of a set. And it abuses a lot of the... Whenever you get a free opportunity to use it, like whether you come in on a Choice Band locked Earthquake or get it up on a Protect, then it will... Then you really make sure that afterwards you are hitting your target as hard as possible and not, failing to do any meaningful damage and then having to switch out. So you're no longer going to be Focus Punching into Suicune. You're going to make sure you HP Grass it. And if you don't HP Grass it, it's because they switched out to something that you threaten harder with Fire Blast or Focus Punch, which you can still use safely because of the protection afforded by Substitute. Now, we're talking Sub-Focus Punch, we have to mention Tyranitar. Tyranitar has a lot of options, even on its subsets. Now, Tyranitar can also do stuff like Sub-Dragon Dance with Lychee Berry to make it more dangerous, but that is a fairly niche set, so we're going to stick with the Sub-Punch. Tyranitar combines a lot of aspects of Substitute we've been talking about thus far, namely the 101 HP subs and the Focus Punch. So with the Sub Punch Tar, then your goal is to protect your... it has a lot of stuff going for it. You ease prediction, like with Charizard, then you make sure that you hit your target as hard as possible. Like, there's no pivoting Gengar into Focus Punch safely because you subbed up, so you know you can Rock Slide. And if they don't stay in to take the Rock Slide, it's because they switch to something else, and you can get your Focus Punch off safely. So, it's guarding against that. It's easing your prediction. It's guarding against revenge kills. Like, there's no more hard switching Dugtrio in on a Rock Slide because T-Tar subbed up and you are dead if you stay in, and if you switch out, you're taking 2 more attacks minimum. So That is what sub does. It's really, really nasty, and it punishes Blissey for staying in. A lot of Blissey players, conscious of the naked Focus Punch T-Tar sets, they'll stay in. They'll go, okay, I'm gonna Seismic Toss. He's gonna try and Focus Punch for free, and I get free damage on him before I switch out. And with Substitute, if Blissey tries to pull that or tries to pull a Toxic or T-Wave, it is up the creek because suddenly T-Tar again is getting 2 hits for free. So. And, very likely a third one after that. So you really, really, really punish Blissey. Obviously, don't switch into a Toxic or T-Wave, but if you come in off a Zapdos, Baton Bass, or a double switch, then you are really ripping through it. Now, the other 2 moves really depend. The classic set is Viltar, named after a veteran in love, and it's a fairly simple, set, all physical. You got your HP Bug for Celebi and Claydol, and of course your obligatory Rock Slide. And, this is the all-physical T-Tar. You ensure you hit Skarmory and Swampert with Focus Punch, so you really smack them, especially with Spikes up for Swampert. So, there's that. Then, of course, there's the classic Boa, which is a set from Net Battle Days, which use Crunch and Thunderbolt to slice through old stall teams. That set isn't really too useful anymore. I mean, some players have been making use of not Thunderbolt, but Thunder, which will allow you to... I would run minus defense on sub T-Tar sets, by the way, because if without a sub, you're not going to beat Dugtrio anyway, so... And you're generally not relying on it to take physical attacks. But you don't want to use minus speed because you don't want to cut into its speed and suddenly get outsped by Blissey, because then you have to waste EVs on speed. It's just not worth it. Use minus defense if you're running a mixed Sub-Punch Tar. Oh yeah, also the Sub Focus Punch Rock Slide HP Bug set, that can also be switched out for HP Grass. G80 used to use that a lot, and you will catch Swampert by surprise, and it's game-changing if it lands, so... And it really guarantees that you are either HP grassing the Swampert, landing that hit, or you are hitting your target with as much accuracy as possible. You are removing the prediction factor. The lack of coverage, Substitute is not a riskless move to add to your moveset. You give up on crucial coverage like that of Earthquake, but the bonus of being able to make sure your attacks land can be very well worth it. And, when you're trying to... Focus Punch Skarmory or HP Grass Swampert, being able to take that aspect out of it is wonderful. Really ensures that you are getting the most bang for your buck. So, this is the modern variation of the old Boa. I mean, you can run Speed EVs if you like, but Thunders threatens Milotic, has Paralysis, hits Skarm just as hard as Fire Blast, so accuracy notwithstanding. However, I think the most modern T-Tar set, or sub T-Tar set, is this one, which... is basically the fire grass combination is great, especially with fighting coverage for opposing Blissey. You'll notice it's the same coverage that this Charizard uses, and on T-Tar it just works like a dream because they're scrambling around trying to figure out how you can have sub and all this coverage because they assume you have Rock Slide. So even once the surprise is up, this is still a very dangerous set to deal with. I mean, yeah, once they start switching Salamence into it, then it's not as good. But before that, not every team has Salamence, and before that, it's still going to make them scramble around. And you're focus punching against Zapdos because they think they have to switch out fearing Rock Slide, but you don't even have it, and they're scrambling to switch around it. This is a great, great T-Tar set. So, yeah, as we've gone over, then it has a lot of really good traits, and you can take some out of special attack and give it speed. In my notes, I have that it should be around like 100 for Skarms and whatnot, and this special attack stat is stronger than Neutral Nature Tar by 1 point, so it's a nice little benchmark. But yeah, I like max special attack, just hit as hard as possible. So yeah, great set. So there are more sub users in advanced though, so we're just going to clear this team builder. And the first one is Zapdos. Zapdos can substitute and Baton Pass, which is, of course, very, very good. So, I mean, the variants of the Zapdos vary because you can go bulk, strong, fast, mix. But the general idea is that you sub and Zapdos's counters are slower Pokemon. That's the general idea. So, like things like Blissey, defensive Jirachi, Celebi, so Reggie, Snorlax. So you sub up, and then you pass to something that has a good chance of maintaining the sub. For example, you will be able to pass a sub to a Metagross very easily against Snorlax because Snorlax doesn't want to be using Earthquake or Earthquake or Focus Punch against the Zapdos behind a sub because Zapdos very feasibly could just get that Thunderbolt off. So in this vein, then Zapdos is both using this as a tool to support its teammates and an offensive prediction easing use of sub. For example, when players want to pivot, instead of switching their Snorlax directly into a Thunderbolt, then they switch their Snorlax into it, or they switch their Swampert into it, and then you sub up, and suddenly they are scared as hell. So, yeah, so it's both an offensive weapon, but it's mostly used as support. And something like Blissey can be annoying because Seismic Toss breaks the subs from things like Metagross. So some players like to pair it with Gengar, Focus Punch Gengar, because Blissey is obligated to go for S-Toss because Ice Beam won't break the sub if you pass to Metagross or T-Tar. So you Seismic Toss, you pass to Gengar, and suddenly Gengar's in behind a sub, and you can threaten Blissey with Focus Punch and a bunch of other stuff in Gengar's move pool. So it's mostly for the purpose of support and easing Zapdos, making sure Zapdos hits its targets. So you can just use it to ensure that you can do Timid or Modest and other, like Calm, even if you like it to take hits. But, and, of course, Zapdos can't sub forever because it's affected by Sand, but it's still very dangerous. And you can also, instead of HP Grass, you can use Agility to really, Agility, and maybe even a Pinch Berry if you're really going all out, although that's, kind of specific. Even Agility is kind of specific. You want the coverage generally. If not HP Grass, then HP Ice. But yeah, so you make sure you hit your targets, or more likely you're going to be passing that sub to to one of its teammates that is likely to be able to maintain it. Like ideally the Metagross against Snorlax scenario, because again, if you think they're going to be trying to Earthquake in that scenario, then you can you can just Thunderbolt and make them pay and have them take damage. They're not healing off in Sand, as we know. Snorlax does not heal at all in Sand. And if you can even go to Gengar, that makes the Gengar pairing even nicer because no one wants a Shadow Ball in that scenario. So, yeah, Subpass Zapdos is really, really dangerous. It's good as a standalone Pokemon or as part of a chain. Some people like it on physical offense with Leechy Berry because Leechy is, when you're passing to things like Metagross. I mean, in theory, you can run, Agility with, Agility with Leechy Berry, and you just pass it off to a Metagross or something, and you just are crazy dangerous. T-Tar, Salamence, whatever you're switching into. So if you want to do that, then again, the HP stat divisible by 4. So you just do the 30 HP IVs. And yeah, it's very dangerous. And what's more, you can also use Jolteon with this exact same set, pretty much. Speaking of Subpass users, there's also Vaporeon who's been seeing a lot of steam because it passes 101 HP substitutes. So if Blissey Vaporeon is great because even answers like Milotic are not going to be able to prevent it from passing a sub at all. And you can either go Hydro Pump, or Surf, but Hydro Pump's certainly better. You can go Ice Beam for coverage and more offensive potential, or you can go Roar, which prevents offense, or not offensive necessarily, but just Roar Suicune in general from phasing you out, or like a full health Scarm. So you are able to prevent sub. Oh, and another reason Zapdos is so good at sub passing is because phasers don't really scare it. Swampert that runs Roar does not want to come in on it, and Skarmory obviously doesn't want to come in on it. So, and even T-Tar does not like eating Thunderbolts. So, no Spadef boost in Gen 3 for Rock types in Sand. So, yeah, what Vaporeon does is it has 101 HP subs, and it passes them off to a teammate, and it abuses its very passive answers, like not passive, but like slow and defensive answers, like Blissey, to ensure you get your T-Tar Metagross in safely behind the sub. So it's harder to slap on teams than Zapdos, but it's very, very good. It's seen a lot of tournament success. Plus, you can make it a great lead and run Starfberry on it, because it lives Zapdos Thunderbolt, and generally you're going to want to run Ice Beam here. But in this scenario, you are potentially passing a 101 HP sub and a Salic boost, which is absolutely huge. So you make things like Tar and Metagross even scarier. So, yeah, it's an absolute nightmare to deal with if set up correctly, which it often is set up very correctly or very easily, because it matches up well against every lead, or every common lead. Tar, Metagross, Salamence, Swampert, Skarmory. So, and if you have Roar, then it matches up pretty well against Suicune as well. So, it's really a great, great Pokemon, and some harder to fit than Zapdos, but that's just because Zapdos is super easy to fit everywhere. So Salic or Lefties, great Pokemon overall, seeing a lot of usage. And, yeah. Finally, I'll mention that, another reason for sub Zapdos is that it's safe against exploding Metagross, which is, of course, extremely good. And it punishes Protect. Of course, you don't want to be protecting as Zapdos subs. Turns the tables on Leech Celebi, and, yeah, so. Oh, and another phaser it destroys, Roar Suicune. So, yeah, it's generally got all the good traits for a Baton Passer, and that makes it great for passing subs. So, there's also, in a similar vein, there's Vapicuno's fun Starfberry Swellow. This is not a serious set, but I just wanted to show it anyway because it's so much fun. Because you have the sub-endeavor factor, and you want to be careful because you don't want to go down to 1 HP with this thing. But you can endeavor something at low HP, and you're really fast, and you can baton, well, not special attack, and you can baton pass, and yeah, so it's just a fun Pokemon. And Starfberry with your already good speed means that when you sub down to the boost, then you get a random +2, and then you can pass that off. Later in the game, you can come back and endeavor something at low HP. Very fun Pokemon, but not very serious. So finally, the last real sub user. Now there is some argument for sub Calm Mind Celebi, but the standard sub Celebi set is sub pass recover. So you're passing subs and you're sub-seeding in the same set. And it's really cool. It's obviously you don't have a real attacking move, but it is very, very effective. And annoying the opponent, you guard yourself against booms from the likes of Metagross. Another thing to mention is that Baton Pass escapes Pursuit. So if you don't have to worry about that. In general, when you're facing a defensive Pursuit T-Tar, even if you don't have a sub up, then you can just get out of there safely. But what you do is you sub up and you leech seed. You have 101 HP subs, so again, passing 101 subs, and you leech seed everything to death, and then you get your teammates in safely and just force good positions for yourself. It requires trappers because it's not very good against phasers, but you bait in Skarmory, you BP to Magneton, and now you're going to sub-pass all over them. So, yeah, great set, great alongside trappers. It's basically a support Celebi that can also help out your teammates a lot by passing them subs. And really, sub really forces the issue with Leech Seed because they have to keep hitting you over and over, and you can sub over and over, and they're getting weaker and weaker, and that forces them into uncomfortable positions, so you can really take advantage of that. So yeah, that's been Gen 3. So let's move on to Gen 4, where thankfully there are less sub users overall. So let's change the generation to 4. So, the most famous, not Bronzong, whoops, I clicked on the wrong Pokemon. The most famous sub-user in Gen 4 is Breloom, because it has Poison Heal, and so alongside Toxic Orb, it heals off its... First of all, it heals in Sand, which is great, but it is not hard for it to heal off its substitute damage to itself, even in Sand, which is very unique. So... And sub alongside sleep, we know how good that is from GSC Jinx. If you hold off on the sub and don't let their Rest Talk Rotom absorb it for free, they can be in a really nasty spot really fast. Especially when you're facing a Pokemon you scare the hell out of, like Swampert. So, and then you have your super powerful stab combo. So this is a pain for any stall team. Even teams with Celebi hate it. You know, the supposed best counter. just because of the threat of sleep and just how hard your stabs hit and how easy it is to support this with Pokemon that threaten the counters, like Pursuit Tyranitar and U-turn spam and things like that. So, and with Rock Sub, this is an absolute devil to deal with because you can't switch around it, and its flying type counters like Zapdos really hate it, and even like Latias and Sand does not enjoy it. You know, Crobat would be amazing against this thing if it wasn't for Stealth Rock. You know, and so it could feasibly run Stone Edge if it wanted, but it wouldn't do that anymore. It used to, but no. Anyway, so yeah, Spore Sub Breloom is very famous. You can run Leech Seed over Seed Bomb. It's an okay set, but the strong Seed Bomb threat is a lot of what makes it good against things like Swampert and Gliscor. So, yeah, Sub and Sleep, and you combine the Sub Sleep and the Sub Punch variants here, and you have Stab Focus Punch, making it even more dangerous. So, yeah, Breloom is just a combination of the most dangerous of... don't run max speed. That was just where I dragged the slider to. You can run, you know, you should run bulk, but generally, yeah, it's up to you how much you run. I like a lot of bulk on my Brelooms, but, you know, some speed is good as well. So, generally run a number divisible by 8 for Poison Heal Recovery. I believe that's correct. So, 320 is the highest, and then 312, and so on. So, yeah, that's the most famous sub-user, number 1. It gets a lot of opportunities because of how much it threatens, especially, you know, something like a Choice T-Tar locked in Pursuit. Free sub for Breloom, yikes. So, yeah. And, I mean, the one thing that Gen 4 brought that really didn't... that it didn't appreciate is U-turn, because in theory U-turn lets you break the sub of a subbing Pokemon and then switch out to something else in the same vein, but a lot of U-turns are choiced, so if you have a Breloom against a Scarf Flygon, let's say, then you can just sub again, or against Infernape or something, and see what they're going to do, and if they U-turn and they switch to something else, then they will... You know, they're still having to contend with the Breloom behind a sub ready to launch a Focus Punch, so they can't do things like U-turn, and if they see you're using Focus Punch, then you switch to Gengar. You know, that would be an easy way of dealing with Breloom, but, so let's say Flygon switches in as, after Breloom spored something, Breloom uses sub, Flygon uses U-turn, sees Breloom is going for Focus Punch, goes safely to Rotom, you know, threat neutralized. But if Breloom subs again to scout what Flygon's going to do, and Flygon U-turns and Rotom comes in, then it's a free Seed Bomb, and, you know, you get to do damage instead of doing no damage. Another obscure mechanic. So let's say that we have the same situation. Breloom spored something, Flygon comes in on the sub, Flygon uses U-turn and breaks the sub. If you run enough bulk to not have this situation arise because of broken subs, then, you know, that's another thing, but I like a lot of attack on Breloom, so. Anyway, so what the thing is that if you U-turn and break the sub, and then you bring in your Gyarados, you would think that you would intimidate it without the sub, right? Wrong. If the substitute breaks, and Gyarados comes in, Intimidate will not go off. This is incredibly obscure, but it's true. I was amazed when I first learned about it, but it is absolutely a thing. So, again, Flygon U-turns, breaks Breloom's sub, Gyarados comes in, Intimidate does not go off. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, that is something to keep in mind. So, yeah, subbing with Breloom on U-turn spam is a good thing. Anyway, moving on to other sub-users. The one everyone hates, Jirachi. Now, Jirachi's old sub-call mindset is still very good. You know, Psychic Thunderbolt is the standard coverage now that Fire Punch is physical. But yeah, Psychic Thunderbolt is generally good. But the set everyone hates is the Sub-Iron headset because it's the flinching and the, you know, behind a sub can be really dirty, especially para-flinching. So you're abusing sub and you're alongside paralysis, and then you add flinch on top of that, and it can get very ugly. This is why it's very important to have sturdy teams in DPP. You know, have a very thorough plan for Jirachi. If Scarf Rotom is your best answer to Jirachi spamming Iron Head, you are going to lose to Jirachi. So, or, Infernape or something. So, Sub, Iron Head, and then the last moves are typically Body Slam and Fire Punch, although you can do stuff like Thunder Wave or Thunder over Body Slam. Thunder is more for luring, Skarmory, and Starmie, whereas Thunder Wave is if you really want to guarantee that pair on stuff like Heatran. But I generally don't like it because that means you don't get to... You get to pair stuff like Rotom, but Rotom is generally more easy to deal with, and I think being able to paralyze ground types like Swampert and Gliscor especially Gliscor, is really crucial. And like even Flygon as well, so... Body Slam or Thunder. Thunder at least has the more tangible benefit of threatening checks like Starmie and Skarmory, and like Milotic, and hitting Heatran fairly decently too. And Fire Punch is good, but can also be HP ground for luring Heatran. So those are some alternatives. But the general idea doesn't change. It's hiding behind subs, and it's spamming paralysis and then going for iron flinches. So the EVs can vary. You can go anywhere from 280 speed to like if you're using special attacks, you should run naive, I think, or just minus special defense. But yeah, you can run just a good amount of HP, or you can go 101 HP subs. I think that's generally the way to go. So you get subs up safely against Clefable, guarding against Knockoff, T-Wave, Seismic Toss, and then some attack investment is good. So your Iron Heads have some meat to them. Some defensive bulk is nice. And some speed investment, can vary from 280 to 286 or 297, and 308 is generally the most accepted standard, though. So then something like this is generally going to get the job done nicely. So yeah, this is a devil of a set, especially when paired with Substitute Machamp, another dangerous Pokemon. So Machamp, of course, does not heal in Sand, which can be to its detriment, especially with its deceptively low bulk. Well, combined with its lack of real resistances. But the thing that makes Substitute Machamp so dangerous is that a lot of the time you rely on switching around Dynamic Punch and Payback, and with Sub, that's not an option. And you run some Speed EVs for Clef, and you can run more Speed EVs for Skarm. Something around here I think is generally going to be fine. And Skarm is a good investment. But if you're paralyzing Skarm, they don't really need it, and it's generally just fine to be above Clefable, while you also keep some good bulk. So then in addition to not being able to switch around its moves safely, you are also going to be hard pressed to deal with Parafusion when it's facing a paralyzed team and Dynamic Punch is confusing everything. So, and hiding behind a sub. So these two together are vicious. I don't think they're broken or anything, but they are undeniably very, very potent together. So the Jirachi Machamp combo can be the devil very often. So the last move, Ice Punch, I think is best for Gliscor. Stone Edge is nice for things like Gyarados and Dragonite. It's up to you. And again, these Pokemon do not need Substitute to do their job, just like Breloom doesn't, but they certainly add a different level of potency to them, make them a lot harder to deal with. So those are subbing Jirachi and Machamp. And now we are moving on to Empoleon. So generally the Pinch Berries thing died out for the most part in Gen 4 because there's a lot of priority running around where there wasn't in advance. But Empoleon keeps the tradition alive with its legendary Sub-Pataya Torrent set with Hydro Pump and then Ice Beam or Grass Knot. Famously hard to make that choice, but very, very, very powerful. And one of the few things Blissey does better than Clefable is being able to check this set, which Clefable gets destroyed by. Not destroyed, but can be very tough to make work for it. So, this set is an absolute monster. And you can go for stuff like Grass Knot over Ice Beam if you like, or Surf over Hydro, but I think the sheer power of Pataya Torrent Hydro is just crazy. So you run 312 HP because you want it to be divisible by 4 again, or 316 or 320 actually, so that's perfect. This speed investment is to outrun Scarf Heatran at +2. You can run more, you can run Timid, so you outrun Scarf Rotom and Adamant Scarf Flygon. I generally like Modest personally. But so this is the pinch ability, Pinch Berry set of DPP, monster of a Pokemon. So yeah, let's move on. Another sub Pokemon, Gengar. Now, Gengar defines the sub split strategy because Gengar hiding behind a sub is generally nasty. Like, you can replace Pain Split here with Will-O-Wisp and or Explosion, and use Black Sludge probably instead of Life Orb if you're running Will-O-Wisp. If you're running Explosion, then it's fine. But just because this substitute eases prediction against Gengar, and also means that it's harder to revenge kill. Like, you can't Scarf Type Pursuit it safely if it's behind a sub, that kind of thing. So it's got that going for it. But with Pain Split, then it introduces a new strategy we haven't seen thus far, which is abusing the low health sub being repeatedly puts you at, and then forcing that on the opponent. So your opponent is healthy, you're subbing down to low HP, whoops, you suddenly Pain Splitted, and now you go back up high while they go down low. So, and then you can rinse and repeat. So it's a really dangerous strategy, and it's a nice way of circumventing the Life Orb recoil problem Gengar sometimes has. So, Rotom can run this set effectively. Rotom will generally... It can go offensive. It hasn't in a long time in tournaments, but it can go like Life Orb, Thunderbolt hits really hard, Thunderbolt, then Shadow Ball or Hydro Pump, but more consistently, and usually with a Heat form, then you will see Sub Willow Pain Split Thunderbolts. Something like max HP, and this. And Ghosts, even with HP investment, has a low HP stat. So, and when you're subbing, you're going to be getting a lot of HP back and bringing them down to real low HP. So, the Sub-Split Ghosts, these are crucial additions that DPP brought to the substitute game. So, yeah, that's pretty... they function... Rotom functions very largely the same to Gengar. And, yeah, protecting against revenge killing, making sure you hit your targets, and weakening your opponent while... Oh, and guarding yourself from things like Clef Knockoff and, T-Waves. And, really finding a way to harass defensive teams. They're both very annoying to those. So, those are the subbing Ghosts. And what is next on our docket? Those are pretty much the big ones. I mean, we've been seeing some substitute Suicunes in newer times. This is based off the Oris Suicune. Now, Sub-Calm Mind, Surf, and then Ice Beam is... You're not going to be able to reliably sweep with this set, but it's nice if you don't value Suicune's health too much, and instead just use it as a wall breaker. Like early in the game, a lot of people have been leading with this set, because Pressure and Sub are nice against Lead Machamp Dynamic Punch, for example. So, and they can sub on, Metagross and scare out lead Heatran. So, and they can set up easily on lead Swampert as well, so it's a pretty good lead. And you can sub up on Clefable, you dominate that, and you just go all out offensive. Some players will like to have been experimenting with clearing the Sandstorm to let the Suicune really run loose. But if they're going to do that, then I think that this set is more effective. The Protect variant, which is inspired by Vinkun or Vince 2612's Suicune from Oris. So, Protect is obviously devastating outside of sand, so you can... Some people have been experimenting with this in advance as well, but not nearly to the extent as in DPP, and it's devilish because with Pressure and Sub, it's really, really tough to deal with. It really scraps every inch of recovery out of Suicune as it can while still maintaining the benefits of Sub, and it's really dangerous outside... I mean, this is very specific, of course. The Suicune cannot be slapped on every team, but it is something to watch out for and something to toy around with. Now, finally, the most devastating of substitute users in... DPP, I don't think I'm missing anything. Like, yeah, okay, you can use Substitute on Magnezone, but it's not like a big deal. So I think I've covered the big ones. Yep, okay, so... Oh, and... Okay, I haven't covered one. That is Ryperior. This is a beast of a Pokemon with paralysis support, taking a cue from Rhydon in the first generation. So you got those 101 HP subs, which are relevant now with Seismic Toss, and you pair this guy with some paralysis support, and he goes to town, especially in Sandstorm for a Spadef boost. Last can be Swords Dance or Ice Punch, depending on your support. But yeah, he's not very often seen, but when he does show up, it's terrifying. Okay, let's get to the big one, Heatran. Now, in modern DPP, when DPP was the current gen, then this set was really popular. Sub, Toxic, Fire Blast, Earth Power, because you really mess with Blissey and Swampert. And whereas if you ran HP Grass just for Swampert, then you would miss out on things like other waters. You don't hit things like Gyarados and Suicune as hard, and you lose out on Blissey. And Clefable really killed the existence of this set, as did Bulky Starmie to an extent. But there were also things like Substitute Explosion, which I still think is a good set. You can run Naive on this set if you like, because it's not really meant to take hits, and your Boom hits harder, which is nice for Latias and Clefable. So, yeah, this set is good, and you see a lot of Lava Plume, even on offensive Sub-Tran now, just because the burn rate is so devastating to Pokemon like Dragonite and Gyarados and Gliscor and Tyranitar and Latias and Swampert and Suicune. So, yeah, it's a fast Tran that can hide behind subs. It guards it from revenge killing. It makes sure it hits its target. And alongside status, T-Spikes or Lava Plume burns, it can be really irritating. And this is a new kind of sub-spam that we haven't really seen before. Heatran is, of course, immune to sand, which allows it to create a lot of substitutes repeatedly. And this makes it really good at stalling for residual damage, which prior to this point we've only occasionally seen with Leech Seed, and not to the extent that Heatran's capable of pulling off. Now, with Explosion, then it doesn't really go for a lot of repeat subs while stalling out poison Pokemon. No, what it does is use Protect. And this is where we first really see Sub and Protect together. So, Lava Plume, Earth Power, this is a great offensive Heatran that uses Protect to scout choice moves like Flygon's Earthquake or U-Turn without a sub. And it just generally lets it scrap for recovery. But alongside Substitute, we all know how good Protect Heatran is. The Power of Protect video I have on the channel will inform you of how good it is if you aren't familiar. But with Sub and Protect, it is an absolute nightmare to deal with because it gets a sub up as you switch, and then you Protect, so it's healing, and it's getting its sub HP back pretty quickly. And not all of it in 2 turns, like something like Breloom outside of Sand can do, but still pretty quickly. And it's more quickly than non-Protect Pokemon would in any case. And then you are hiding behind the subs and watching your opponent succumb to passive damage, and you already have all the benefits of being guarded against revenge kills and being able to make sure you hit your target with the right move. So, yeah. And the most extreme variant of this set is the legendary Torment Tran, which has a lot of different EVs. You can go fast. Generally, you're going to go bulky. But the general idea is that with Sub and Protect, most Pokemon are not going to have more than one move that is able to hit Heatran super effectively or break Heatran's sub. So with Torment and the combination of Sub and Protect, you can lock them out of that move and stall out things you normally would not even think about, like a lot of variants of Gyarados, a lot of T-Tars. It's just generally a massive, massive pain with the right support. So yeah, Torment Tran is an absolute devil, and a lot of it has to do with Sub and Protect, because Torment alongside Protect is not a huge deal, but Torment alongside Sub and Protect on a Pokemon with a great mono attacking move like Lava Plume and longevity and sand and bulk and a ton of opportunities to come in with all the Pokemon it scares. Oh, it's a monster. With its resist, it's going to get its sub up real easily, and then you have your Swampert that can Earthquake it, and you have to risk Lava Plume burns, and once you get that, it protects and subs, and the sub-protect combination was really... Heatran was a pioneer of this strategy, so... And that is DPP. So we are moving... So this thing with hazards, especially T-Spikes, is just a nightmare. So, moving on to our final generation... Black and White. So we're going to start off with Heatran again. It doesn't use Torment as much anymore, but the Sub-Protect set, you're not going to use Explosion anymore because Black and White nerfed Explosion, so it's not good. The one thing Black and White did change about Substitute mechanically is that now, if you hit a Substitute, if you have a Life Orb Pokemon and you hit a Pokemon with a Substitute, you still take damage. You still take Life Orb recoil. In DPP, let's say Gengar with... A Life Orb Gengar uses Focus Blast against Sub Heatran. Gengar will not take Life Orb Recoil, and that's significant. But in Gen 5, you take Life Orb Recoil for your Life Orb attacker hitting a sub, so you can feasibly, in Gen 5, Life Orb stall Pokemon with repeated use of Substitute, which is pretty crazy, making it even more effective. So yeah, this Heatran set can have all sorts of EVs. It can go Toxic in the last slot. That's a monster of a set. It can go HP Ice, so Gliscor doesn't wall it. Earth Power, so Gengar, so other Heatran don't wall it. Roar to force damage. Will-O-Wisp is really nasty. So you have a ton of options. Earth Power, HP Ice, Will-O-Wisp, Toxic. Brutal. So hell, you could even use 2 Fire Stabs if you really wanted. Lava Plume and like Magma Storm or something. That might be a little overkill, but it's just generally a very, very good Pokemon. And I don't have the EVs on me right now, but you're going to want to survive. You're going to want your sub to survive Rotom Wash Volt Switch. That makes the set an absolute pain to deal with. So yeah, T-Spikes aren't as widely available in Black and White. They're only really used on Tentacruel, and that's on Rain teams. Heatran doesn't fit on Rain teams. And not to mention that T-Spikes aren't even that good in Black and White because, of Tentacruel and stuff like Amoonguss and a lot of Pokemon not being hit by them. So, but just Spikes in general are very good in Black and White. So this Heatran set is a monster. So then there's Breloom, of course, back again. Now, its Sub-Punch set wasn't really used commonly prior to the Sleep ban, but now that Black and White has banned Sleep, then it has found use for its Sub-Punch set once again. And it now uses Sub and Protect, because it has been discovered how good Protect on Breloom is as well, scouting things like Latios, Sand Damage, Scouting Choice, gaining Poison Heal Recovery, of course, in Rain and Sand alike. So, and then you combine it with Substitute, which allows it to unleash Focus Punch, and make sure it hits its targets, guard from revenge killing, all that good stuff, using prediction. It's, getting to the Sleep ban in a way was very good for Breloom because it no longer has to feel like it has to run Spore, and it can run a monstrous set like this one. Again, I think EVs like this are good. The main difference from, yes, keep watching please. The main difference with this set from DPP and Black and White is that it can very feasibly run Facade over Seed Bomb now, and because the Rotom forms are no longer Ghost, and Facade's super effective coverage is only really needed on Jellicent, who's not super common, and neutral Facade is stronger than Seed Bomb against targets like Gliscor, Landorus, Therian, and it gives you better coverage for hitting things like Latios on the Switch. So if you're not facing Jellicent, then Seed Bomb then Facade is generally better in Black and White. So, Gengar basically doesn't exist. You hit Reuniclus harder, that's a big one. So yeah, this set is very, very, very good in the current Black and White metagame. And hard to deal with for a number of reasons that we've gone over. So, what else subs? Oh, the standard Zam set is Focus Sash, and for good reason. However, sometimes you want a little more power, and Zam is the perfect example of using Substitute to take advantage of a sacrifice. Because if you sack something slower to then get a clean revenge kill with your Scarf Landorus or Chople Titar or a combination of both, then yeah, that's usually going to be good against Sash Zam. But if it gets up a sub as you try to do that, then that's nightmarish. And the fact that it's even stronger, so you have to keep your T-Tar in really good shape to be able to Chople survive that Focus Blast. It's very, very powerful. So there's that. You guard yourself from revenge kill, you take advantage, you ease prediction. That's another big thing. It ticks all the boxes. I mean, you're not going to be able to use Zam as an emergency defensive stop anymore, but you gain a ton of offensive potential. And yeah, you lose a coverage move, but things like its Shadow Ball are just destructive. It's against Reuniclus and the Lottie twins, so teams fall into range for its attacks a lot quicker. You don't have to worry about it not taking an attack because it can, it doesn't have to preserve its sash at all costs. And yeah, it muscles through things like Heatran more brutally. And if you try to protect out of range for an attack, it can punish you with sub. Protecting Heatran, okay, now I'll be out of Zam range. Uh-oh, it's subbed up. That's not good. So, yeah, Sub Zam is a perfect example of what we've been talking about. The easing prediction, the guarding against revenge killing, the taking advantage of a slower sacrifice, it's all there. Here's another devil set. Sub DD. So we've got a sub booster here, a sub healing booster here, because there's no fairy types in Gen 5, and only Steels resist Dragon Claw. And even Steels often struggle to deal with this Dragonite set one-on-one. So you get one move coverage, which is all you really need, and then you have sub to guard from status, leech seed, all that, and roost, and you get back to multi-scale and do stuff like remove your flying typing for a turn. So if you roost and get up to multi-scale, then on that turn Landorus HP Ice is doing like 17%. So you're able to grab multiple DDs easily and keep healing them off and boost over and over and over, and this would not be possible without Substitute. So the EVs can kind of vary. As long as you're out running Scarf Latios at +2, then you're generally doing fine. But the rest you can special defense for more setting up against HP Ices and Draco Meteors and stuff, and I'm sure there's something to be said for more attack investment and defense investment for dealing with like SD Gliscor, and attack investment for muscling through HP Ice Reuniclus. But generally, Spadef investment is the safest. So taking Ice Beams you really shouldn't be taking from things like Starmie. It's crazy. So yeah, Sub is the linchpin of this Dragonite set. It is one of the most dangerous Pokemon to deal with in Black and White, and yeah, Sub is a big reason why. Now, some people have been experimenting with stuff like Sub Protect Excadrill. I don't think that's really an established set yet, so I'm going to leave it off, but I'll just give it a passing mention for now. Sub Salic Garchomp. Salic isn't really seen too much, but on Dragon Spam teams, then they're going to be expecting Choice Scarf, and then they're going to protect and try to scout you, and you can use Dual Chop here to break through Zamsash, or you can use Outrage for power against Gliscor. Either is fine. And, you're going to... You are going to... Subbing with Garchomp on a Heatran Protect is like the best feeling ever. So then you get your Swords Dance for free, and you are just devastating everything in sight. And you're faster than Scarf Lando, so they can't check you. And you can pull tricks similar to Heracross in Advance against faster Revenge Killers, and against slower Revenge Killers you get your SD. So it's very, very similar in that regard. So yeah, this thing is an absolute monster. Rarely seen, but devastating on the rare occasion it does show up. Gyarados with Sub DD I think is a relic of the past. It's pretty good sometimes against some rain teams. It's lefties, Sub DD, Waterfall Bounce, Moxie or Intimidate, both are okay. But generally has a lot of issues. I think there are better ways to make use of Gyarados, but it has used Sub successfully in the past. We've gone over Heatran. Hydreigon used to use Sub in Black and White 1. It was okay, but not really so great anymore. Keldeo. Jirachi has used Sub Calm Mind. Actually, no, we got to mention Jirachi. 3 attack sets were really good before Excadrill exploded. I'm sure there's still some place for them, but this set was really annoying to a lot of Sand and Rain teams alike. So something like this with more speed for hyper offense stuff like Dragonite. So yeah, something like this is really good. Yeah, it's an offensive defensive Pokemon because it checks things like Zam and Latias and Tornadus, and it threatens things like Ferrothorn once it gets a sub up, and yeah, so that's very dangerous, and Sub Calm Mind has been successful in the past, although I think that set's best days are behind it. Keldeo uses Sub on occasion with Calm Mind because it allows it to walk all over Tentacruel. Tentacruel goes from being a great counter to most sets to being complete setup fodder for this variant, so that's why rain teams generally need a backup like Encore, Politoed, or Latios, or both. Maybe even Parasong on Politoed in emergencies. Toxicroak is hard to fit, so... Yeah, Sub Calm Mind Keldeo destroys Rain, absolutely ruins Rain Stall. So it's pretty much it. It doesn't really abuse Sub as hard in non-Rain Tentacruel matchups. It doesn't really abuse Substitute as much. It doesn't need to ease its prediction because its stabs are so easy to throw out as much. And it's not really taking advantage of slower sacks most of the time. I mean, it can, but that's not the selling point of Substitute on Keld. It's really to ruin Tentacruel. So, Kyurem Black used to use subsets a lot, but nowadays not so much. Regular Kyurem, which is in BL, has a potentially dangerous Subroost set, but hasn't really been seen a lot. Subroost, Ice Beam, Earth Power, but in the past it was fairly annoying. Volcarona doesn't really use Sub. Nothing else really uses Sub. I mean, okay, no, that's not quite true. Sorry, I underestimated it. So, Toxicroak uses some Sub Punch action, and with Dry Skin and Rain, it heals up really quickly, allowing it to sub repeatedly, and you can Sucker Punch, Ice Punch. This set is not very good anymore because of the rise of Reuniclus, And, some people struggled with Nightshade Jellicent, even with Toxic, and, watching out for Sand. That was still a problem, but, then you have to take away one of Ice Punch or Sucker Punch, neither of which you want to do, because Sucker Punch is crucial for faster stuff, Ice Punch is crucial for Gliscor, and then Reuniclus just ruins all of it anyway, so... but yes, Toxicroak can use Sub pretty nicely, if, on rare occasions. Tentacruel is a massively annoying Sub Pokemon on Rain. Sub, Spin, Scald, and then the traditional last move is Toxic. I remember when this set first came out, it was a devil. You generally run at least 286 speed on Tentacruel because otherwise Mamoswine is going to ruin you. Although nowadays a lot of Tentacruel are running speed for Excadrill as well. But generally, this much. If you want more Spadef for Latios and Living Zam at high health and some defense for... I don't know. I don't think it's really useful to run defense on Tentacruel most of the time. Unless you have Protect, in which case you can use it to sponge CB Tarakion in close combats. But that brings me to my personal favorite Tentacruel set, which I've been advocating for a long time now. And it is Protect. Now you're going to say, well, this set does nothing against Jellicent. I'm going to say Jellicent's seen better days, and it's not the hardest thing to lure with another Pokemon, like a Toxic Politoed or Keldeo on your team. And this set is so much better against everything else, it's crazy. I mean, it takes Sub Protect to an extreme because it has Rapid Spin to waste PP against things like Calm Mind and Reuniclus. If it attacks, then you just Sub Protect until it runs out of moves. If it's starting to spam Calm Mind, you spam Spin, and this set is an absolute monster. EVs can vary, but good lord, it is infuriating to face this thing. So you can run Skull, you can run Toxic or Protect. You're not going to run T-Spikes, but I think Protect is really, really good. I've advocated for this set a lot. So, yeah, this is the premier Sub-Rain Pokemon. Then there's Thundurus Therian, who runs Sub, Thunder, on Rain, of course, Sub, Thunder, HP Ice, and then Focus Blast, Nasty Plot, or Agility. I think Focus Blast is generally the safest because being walled by Excadrill is dumb. And, being able to immediately smack T-Tar and Heatran and Ferrothorn is really good as well. Some people like Nasty Plot. I think Sub-Agility is definitely the worst of the three. Some people like it, but what makes this set so good is its EV spread. I don't have it on me, but, hit the damage calc. And they run a ton of defense EVs. I think it's something like this. And it's to survive Ferrothorn Power Whip with the Sub. As soon as they run Gyro Ball, then this goes out the window, which is another reason why I prefer non-Sub Thundurus so much. I prefer Agility, but it's really, really nasty to face this set once it gets a free Sub. I mean, you can't Protect against it. You're going to make sure you HP Ice the Latios or Focus Blast the T-Tar, which means it goes a long way in playing around Sand. Make sure you hit Thunder against Rotom, 70% of the time. And... yeah, you don't really need a special attack investment on it because it's so strong. I think Timid is a waste, but Modest is good. Timid is okay, I guess. I mean, it's still crazy strong, but yikes. So if I were to run Timid, I would run a spread like Excadrill or Lando. I forgot to mention Tentacruel can go up to 310 as well. So it can run a spread something like this. But yeah, then you can run Focus Blast or something. It's basically the idea of not abusing slower sacks as much as making sure, guarded against revenge killing for one, but really ensuring you hit your target with this thing. Because a lot of times you don't counter Thundurus, you predict around it, and Substitute takes that away. So that is the strength of Thundurus. So now I think we are on our second to last Pokemon, which is Tarakion. Now, Sub-Salic Tarakion is feasible, but not really too practical, so the main subset is Sub-SD Stabs, because those stabs are just beautiful, and then Rock Gem. So, SD Rock Gem allows you to break through stuff you normally wouldn't, like Slowbro, Reuniclus, Gliscor, Landorus, and the reason you run Sub is, you guessed it, making sure your attacks hit their target. Again, Tarakion, something you predict around. You gotta predict which stab it's gonna go for. And Substitute removes that. You also guard against revenge killing. And man, you really make sure they do not sack a slower Pokemon. If they try to sack their Excadrill or Heatran or Ferrothorn or Rotom against this thing, good night. So that's a big one. That's a big one. And you also guard against things like Heatran Toxic. But it's really just First of all, Tarakion doesn't have many better moves, and you can very feasibly drop Substitute on this set with Rock Polish as well. But Sub also makes players pay for using Protect Excadrill or Heatran to scout what they think is a Choice Band Tarak, and then it gets a Sub up, and they are in a world of hurt. So, yeah, this set is an absolute monster as well. And, yeah, so now we come to the final set. This set, the only reason this set is not seen as much as it used to be is because the metagame warped so much to make sure it couldn't do anything. At its peak, this set was the worst thing to be weak to ever, because if you can't beat this thing, if you can't sit on this thing once it gets a sub up, you are in trouble. I mean, sometimes you could run Taunt to ruin Skarmory, but you know, it just wasn't the same as sub protecting everything, because it's sand immune. For those who are listening and not watching, this is Gliscor. It's sand immune, so it heals off its subs with Toxic Orb and Poison Heal in 2 turns, which is easy because first turn sub, second turn protect, back to where you started. You know, a lot of the time its only foe was its own sub and protect PP, which still usually didn't tend to be a problem when it was stalling out entire teams. And, you know, EVs could be whatever. Generally, faster than Dragonite is generally fine, because you still maintain a lot of bulk for Tarakion and friends, Garchomp and such. So yeah, this set was an absolute devil. I mean, Rotom, everyone thought Rotom was a pretty good check to Gliscor, and then, you know, this set came out. You sub-stall its Hydro Pumps. If it comes in on you, you Toxic, and it's really good night. It's lights out. You know, good luck beating this with a team of choice Pokemon. This set against Dragmag with like Latios and Garchomp and Dragonite and Kyurem and everything is like the most unfair, lopsided matchup ever that any one Pokemon can have against another team. So this set perfected the sub-protect strategy of Heatran, because it gets its sub-HP back so quickly, and Toxic Earthquake is a classic combination, with Earthquake hitting steals and poisons. And, yikes. It is, you know, this set's not very good anymore with all the Poison Heal Breloom and the Reuniclus, and just generally being able to sit on it more easily. And, you know, other Gliscor as well, of course, completely dominate the set. But at the peak of its powers, this set was an absolute nightmare. Black and White 1 and a lot of Black and White 2. It would just sit on you, and this is the peak of what sub-nightmares look like. So, alright, we are going to end it there, because this has been a lot of sub-talk. So, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was interesting, historically informative, one of those for you. And check out Superior Snivies, who has done all the music you've heard in this video. And yeah, so I was glad to cover one of the most unique moves in Pokemon history. Maybe I'll do the same for, you know, another move. Like I did a video on False Swipe. I wrote a Stealth Rock and its many victims. So if you want me to cover another move, then let me know, like U-Turn, or, you know, I already did Knockoff on my own channel, actually. You can check that out if you haven't. Or like Rapid Spin, maybe. That could be a cool one. But yeah, it was cool to check out how sub has changed in the first 5 generations. It's yeah, was glad to shed some light on it. So once again, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you found it informative, and I will catch you next time.